Hi, welcome to Box on the Box, Rock and Celluloid, Bot Brat for short. I'm over Box, so today I'm going to be talking about film franchise fatigue. I think we see a lot of that now in today's market for films, and it's been particularly prevalent this summer and in the last few summers of the cinema in terms of how much the grosses are going down, but the costs are going up. So I thought we'd just have a bit of a look at it. I think the earliest example of film franchise fatigue I can think is with my beloved Bond franchise. So the Bond films, if people are aware of them, always used to come out every year in the 1960s, and then it was every 2 years. The only time that sort of broke tradition was the kind of nearly 3 year gap or 2.5 year gap between The Man with the Golden Gun and The Spy Who Loved Me. But in actual fact, The Man with the Golden Gun had come out in late 1974, so they'd actually taken an 18-month gap, which I think was a mistake. Basically, Live and Let Die did very well, and they wanted to strike while the iron was hot in terms of establishing Roger Moore, because really the Bond franchise was still in a bit of a shady water, I suppose, in terms of an audience accepting another James Bond. But anyway, there was a little blip with The Man with the Golden Gun, and then they had big successes with The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, kind of almost matching the Connery era. But as the 80s started, the grosses just started to subside a little bit with each film. For Your Eyes Only didn't do as well in the States, but did very well globally, and was fairly comparable to Moonraker internationally. Octopussy did better in the States and beat Never Say Never Again, but its global take wasn't quite as much. And I think, by the time View to a Kill came out, I'd imagine the trailer wasn't exactly, pardon me, zinging. Roger Moore was starting to look very old, really bad. I never saw View to a Kill at the cinema. It was in the era of VHS, so I've seen every Bond film from Diamonds Are Forever through to recent times at the cinema, apart from A View to a Kill. I think it just felt like, it's 2 years, it's another Bond film out. Of course, 1985 is the year of Back to the Future. That was very much the thing then. Although the Duran Duran title song was a big hit, again, for me, it just felt like Bond had it didn't feel as essential that the audience needed to go out and see it. Now, this film still went to profit, but the grosses are quite a bit lower relatively to what the previous Roger Moore films were doing. And I think this affected the Timothy Dalton ones as well. Normally, getting a new Bond in would freshen it up, and it did at the international box office to a certain extent, but not at the American box office. I think they were expecting Pierce Brosnan. But I think the problem was it was another 2 year gap, and if they'd just waited another year just to kind of make the hunger a bit more, The Living Daylights, although it did well, might have done even better. And then, of course, this went on to License to Kill again. They did a Bond film another 2 years after The Living Daylights. Maybe if they let a 3 year gap. There was marketing problems with that. But basically what I'm saying is the 6 year gap, which is in a massive amount of time back then, from License to Kill to Goldeneye to the Bonds, A World of Good. When Bond came out, it freshened it up again. People went out to see it, and the grosses for Goldeneye and the Brosnan era were great, as they were the Craig era. And obviously there's been some bigger gaps then. So that's an example there early on. And now we can see that with what's happened with Marvel, I think. With Marvel, you had 2 films coming out each year, sometimes 3. But basically the audience had something vested in that, which was basically you go and see every film, you see all the reels at the end. I forget what the name of the end scenes are. But what that did was gave people the expectation of building towards Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Now, what's interesting with the Marvel films is when it came out, Iron Man was a really big hit, but some of the grosses were solid, but not massive. But they made a profit. But I think some of those films aren't actually that good. Thor: The Dark World's pretty forgettable. Avengers: Age of Ultron was a mess. Things like the second Ant-Man is alright, and so on. But audiences were prepared to kind of pay out to go and see those films with a view that, this would all pay off. Should also mention Captain Marvel, not a well-liked film, really, and it grossed $1 billion, really on the back of how big things had got with things like Captain America, the reintroduction of Spider-Man and so on. But once that was over, and you had your Avengers Endgame moment, which I think for a while, for a week or something, until Avatar came back out, was the biggest grossing film of all time. Now after that, it was like, well, where did Marvel go? Audiences have invested all this time. They've sat through films they really enjoyed. They've sat through films they don't like, or weren't as good, but they had this payoff. Now I'm not really bothered about the Avengers Endgame, Infinity War films. I've seen them, but a lot of people were really happy with them. But after that, it's like, where'd you go? You had COVID and then a release like Black Widow, which was really strange because the character, sorry, spoiler alert, died in a previous film. Zhang, Legend of, what's it called? Anyway, you know the one I'm talking about, sorry, with Michelle Yeoh in. That started off good but wasn't very good. And then you had a series of lame sequels. This was the phase 4. Then they seemed to kind of go into phase 5, but it didn't seem very defined. Which really brings us to where we're at. I think we're in phase 6, don't quote me. I did go and see the Fantastic Four First Steps. Now, I enjoyed it. It was okay. It was better than recent Marvel efforts. My wife really enjoyed it. But its box office, after initial really strong opening, isn't going great guns. This is probably going to gross less than $600 million. Now, in normal terms, that would be great. But the cost of these films is so much. I imagine this film's cost north of $200 million. Big marketing budget. If it grosses $600 million, it's probably at best going to break even on its production and marketing. It may not break even. Now, of course, people still do buy Blu-rays, and it will go streaming. That may encourage people to sign up for Disney+. But these grosses are no way near what they used to be. And then Marvel pretty much had a straight-ahead flop with Thunderbolts. This film was really well received, pretty good reviews, and it grossed less than $400 million. Captain America, the most recent one, only just grossed over $400 million. So the problem for Marvel is you need to start making cheaper films. This is kind of what happened to the Star Trek reboot. They were splashing out budgets of close to kind of $170, $180 million. And it turned out Star Trek's just not popular enough to gross enough to make the money back. So Marvel need to think about this. They need to start making films for $150 million and spending $100 million on the marketing, and then looking at getting over that $500 million line, $600 million to turn a profit. I'm not saying there won't be a day when Marvel's gross $1 billion again, but there was a routine moment where the expectation was that they would gross over $1 billion or, you know, $800, $900 million, and that's just not the case now. The reason is it's just there's been too much content out there. There's been too many films without a clear kind of, or as clear an objective post Avengers Endgame, and then you've got these loads of TV shows, and there's a lot of negativity with fanboys online, and that's really hurting. So that's my sort of take on that. The other one's the Fast and Furious, which is one of the most weirdest, interesting journeys of a film franchise, I think. It started off as just a straight-ahead hot rod street racing film thriller. I liked the trailer at the time, but I remember going to see, well, I wasn't that fussed with it, and I pretty much have been like that ever since. But anyway, that film did pretty well on a fairly medium budget, as did the next one. The gross went down for the Tokyo Drift, but it still made a profit, but more importantly, it had a Vin Diesel cameo at the end. People really took to that, and then they kind of rebooted it with Fast and Furious, which did really well. And then they did, was the fourth film, then they did Fast and Furious 5, which for a lot of people is the best film in the series. I actually think that's really good. It's set in Brazil, great action sequences in favelas, great car chase sequences, pulling the safe through. That did well. Then the sixth one did even better, and then Paul Walker tragically died, and that actually stimulated the gross for the seventh one, which actually grossed more internationally than The Force Awakens, not as much worldwide. Massive hit, and this continued, although the gross went down a bit with Fast 8, and I think things started to waver on Fast 9. Certainly Fast 10 or Fast 9 came out in COVID, got people back in pictures, but the last one cost a ludicrous amount of money, something like over $300 million. I think it grossed north of $700 million. I mean, it would not have made a profit, but the crazy thing was that they ended up going into space. Now, I haven't seen this film, but on the trailer, a car does go into space. And what's happened with that series, it started off as this, street racing, action, thriller thing, and then it's ended up as them kind of like secret agents and more like Mission Impossible. I think the thing was, at the end of the day, this franchise peaked with Fast 7 in terms of how much it could gross. It was okay with Fast 8, but then they did a Hobbs and Shaw thing, Fast 9, Fast 10, Fast X, and so on. It's just run its course. Whether they will try and finish the franchise, but they're gonna have to do a low budget. You cannot expect this film to gross more if they're releasing them on more than $700 million, in which case you cannot be spending the money they have. And that brings us to Mission Impossible, a franchise that was really strong out of the blocks. Second film did really well. Third one less so, but it kept it cooking over. And then it kind of rebooted itself with the fourth one. Excellent gross for that, excellent gross for the fifth one. And then it most definitely peaked with the sixth one. Although after inflation, it didn't gross as much as the first two. What a tremendous action film that was. Amazing. And that built up a fever for the seventh one, Dead Reckoning Part 1, as it was known then. And then that just didn't seem to happen. That petered out at less than $600 million. It was in post-COVID times. They spent an awful lot of money on it. But the grosses wouldn't have yielded profit, and then they kind of had to call the second film The Final Reckoning and not Dead Reckoning Part 2. I mean, that whole Part 1, Part 2 thing kind of died off. And this new film is going to cough and split to $600 million, which again would be okay if the film didn't cost, I think it cost $400 million or something crazy. Now, I'm not sure whether that's somehow combined with the first part. But either way, this franchise as a profit-making thing is done. Now, obviously, you know, once you've got all those Mission Impossible films, yeah, you can put them in a box set for Blu-rays for people who kind of watch those things still. You've got your streaming, you've got your Paramount Plus, you can sell them on to other streamers. So, overall, this might sort of get there. But it's just weird, you know, Tom Cruise, you know, it did fall out, then he had that massive peak with Maverick, and it just felt like, but, you know, he kind of peaked. So, yeah, that's another one. And you got Harry Potter as well. They tried to kind of continue the Harry Potter vibe with the Fantastic Beasts, and that just petered out after 3 films. And now they're going to be doing like the whole thing again as a TV show, which kind of sums up streaming mentality as well. Just monitoring Jurassic World series, Jurassic Park, that's an interesting one. No one seems to tire of dinosaurs yet, but the grosses on this one, this is looking like it's going to gross, maybe it might get to 900 million. This is Jurassic World Rebirth. I'm just looking over my screen there. But that's noticeably down from Jurassic World Dominion by $100 million, $150 million, and the other Jurassic World ones. So how long can this franchise withstand that? Well, I'm not sure what the cost of Jurassic World is, but I think it was about, Rebirth was about a couple $100 million. You've got quite big marketing costs, which would be another $100 million more. So this film's going to make a profit. But that magic number, that $670 million gross thing, you know, if less people go to the next one, and the next one they're planning another 2, this is another one where people could just tire of dinosaurs. But the movie making business is all about profit. If something gets out there into the marketplace and it breaks even, well, it's not made a profit on its box office, but it can make profit on its TV and streaming and what limited Blu-ray sales and so on. And if they get the budgets lower, you know, it can make more profit. I think the thing for Hollywood is you cannot be spending these stupid budgets. Look what happened with the last Indiana Jones film. They spent a crazy amount of money. And it just, it's one of the biggest flops ever, which is just really sad as an Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford fan. And you have other examples. I mean, even the James Bond films, you know, in the Daniel Craig era, were hitting a budget of $250 million. You've got a lot of marketing there. No Time to Die's gross was below $800 million. Again, you know, did that film make a profit? Maybe just. And obviously James Bond, you know, fans like myself will buy big box sets and things like that. And these things run and run, you know, on ITV every other day. So, you know, that's got ancillaries, I suppose you call it, where it can keep going. But I think, you know, the days of film companies spending these exorbitant amounts and releasing too much into the marketplace, they need to think about it, because they will have a situation where films don't make profit, and then you're basically mothballing it and trying to reboot it or coming up with another idea. And Hollywood doesn't seem to be doing much of that at the moment, coming up with new ideas. If you look at the DC thing, they got James Gunn in to do the Superman thing. Now that film's been quite well received, but again, the gross, it's probably going to gross about $600 million. This film won't make a profit, I don't think. But anyway, we'll see. But yeah, film franchise fatigue. It's like too much of the same thing in too short space of time, I think. Eventually all franchises kind of hit their limit and peter out or need refreshing. So, and I'll leave it there. So remember, share and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers, thanks.